When I asked about the date of my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law said, "We got married yesterday. Just for special people." A week later, she called me about money, and I said, "Didn't I tell you?" My name is Margaret Lewis, and I am 62 years old. If you see me now sitting in my small but neat living room with a cup of tea, you might think I'm just another elderly woman living quietly, counting her days in peace. But peace, that's something I had to fight for, because once, not too long ago, I was humiliated by the very people I loved most. It all began last spring, when my only son David called less and less. At first I didn't think much of it. He had moved to another city for work, and I told myself he must be busy. But deep inside, a mother's instinct whispered something was wrong. When he met Clara, I was happy for him. She seemed polite at first, smiled sweetly, brought flowers, even helped wash the dishes after dinner. But beneath that sweetness, there was a sharpness in her tone, a coldness in her eyes. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill the air, it freezes relationships. Still, I tried to be kind. I invited them both for Sunday lunches, sent them small gifts, and reminded David how proud I was of him. I didn't want to lose my son to the distance between us. Or worse, to the manipulation of a woman who saw me as competition. Months passed. One evening I called David and Clara answered. "Oh, hi, Margaret," she said in that careful, polite tone that sounds respectful, but feels like a knife wrapped in silk. "Is David home?" I asked. "He's busy," she replied quickly. "We'll call you later." They never did. Weeks turned into silence. Then, one day, I saw a photo on social media. Clara in a white dress, holding a bouquet, David beside her, smiling. The caption said, "Yesterday was magical, just for special people." My hands trembled as I stared at it. I couldn't breathe. I scrolled again, hoping it was just an engagement shoot. But no, there were comments. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis. You two are perfect together." They had married. Without me. The next day I called David. He didn't answer. So I called Clara. When she picked up, I said quietly, "Clara, I saw the photos. When was the wedding?" She hesitated, then laughed softly. "Oh, Margaret, we got married yesterday. We wanted something small. You know, just for special people." Her words hit me like stones. For a long moment I said nothing. My throat felt dry. "Special people," I repeated softly. "I see." That night I cried until my eyes burned. Not because I wasn't invited, but because my son allowed it. Because somewhere between growing up and falling in love, he had forgotten the woman who raised him alone. Through nights of double shifts and empty plates, I told myself I'd let it go. I promised I wouldn't call again. But a week later, my phone rang. It was Clara. Her tone was different this time. No sweetness, just stress. "Margaret, hi. I know it's awkward, but could you please help us out this month? The rent's overdue and David's salary got delayed." For a second, I didn't know how to react. After all the disrespect, she had the audacity to ask me for money. "Clara," I said slowly, "you want me to help with your rent?" "Yes," she said quickly. "Just this once. You know how it is starting out." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Didn't I tell you?" I said softly. She sounded confused. "Tell me what?" "That I only help special people." And then I hung up. That was the first time I ever said no to my son. Or to anyone who thought they could treat me like I was disposable. But it wasn't the last. Because what came next changed everything. That call opened a wound, but it also lit a fire inside me. I wanted to know what went wrong, why my son had turned away from me. And as I began to dig deeper, I discovered truths that broke my heart and built my revenge. After I hung up that day, my hands trembled. The weight of all those years of love, of sacrifice, of motherhood, it all came crashing down. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed where I had once rocked David to sleep. I could still remember his tiny hands clutching my fingers, the way he used to whisper, "Mama, you're my favorite person in the world." And now I was no one. But do you know what's strange about pain? It sharpens you. It clears your vision. It makes you notice what you once ignored. That night, I opened an old wooden box from under my wardrobe. Inside were every letter, photo, and school drawing David had ever made. I had saved them all, like pieces of my heart kept safe in paper form. And as I looked through them, I realized something painful. My son hadn't changed overnight. I had lost him slowly, one little compromise at a time. First, it was when he stopped visiting. Then when he forgot my birthday, then when he started defending her even when she disrespected me. And I kept forgiving. Because that's what mothers do, don't they? We forgive and forgive until forgiveness becomes our prison. But that night something inside me broke, or maybe it finally healed. The next morning I got up early. I made myself coffee, opened my old notebook, and started writing. Not a letter, not a complaint, just thoughts. I wrote about how people confuse kindness with weakness, about how silence can scream louder than anger, and how love without respect is just control. 3 days later, I decided to visit them, not to argue, but to see with my own eyes how far gone my son truly was. I called first. Clara answered again. "Oh, hi, Margaret," she said in that falsely bright tone. "What a surprise. We're a bit busy today." "I'll only stay a minute," I replied. "I just want to bring some things for David." There was a pause. Then reluctantly she agreed. When I arrived, the building looked newer than I expected, but the paint on the doors was already peeling. Inside, I heard muffled voices. Clara opened the door, half smiling, her makeup perfect, her tone sugary sweet. "Margaret, you didn't have to come all this way." I smiled calmly. "Mothers don't need an invitation to see their children." David was in the living room, wearing a wrinkled shirt, sitting in front of his laptop. He looked thinner, paler. When he saw me, guilt flashed across his face. He stood quickly and hugged me almost too tightly. "Mom, I was going to call you." I smiled faintly. "Of course you were." Clara busied herself pretending to fix something in the kitchen. I could feel her discomfort from across the room. "Nice place," I said, glancing around. It wasn't much. Rented furniture, unpaid bills on the counter, and an expensive handbag tossed carelessly on the sofa. The contrast told me everything. They were living a life they couldn't afford. Not emotionally, not financially. After a few minutes, Clara joined us. "Can I get you some tea?" "No, thank you," I replied. "I just came to give David something." I handed him a small envelope. Inside was a photo. Him at 8 years old, holding his first school medal. On the back, I had written in my own handwriting, "For the boy who once said I was his favorite person. If you find him again, tell him I miss him." He stared at it, speechless. Then Clara, uncomfortable with the silence, tried to change the topic. "So on about that rent?" David's head snapped up. "Clara!" But she didn't stop. "I was just saying we could use some help. You know, just until—" I stood. My voice was calm but firm. "I already told you, Clara, I help special people." And I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard David call, "Mom, wait." But I didn't turn around, not yet. That night, when I returned home, I cried again. But not from pain this time. It was release, because for the first time in years, I had set a boundary. Still, part of me hoped he would come back. Apologize, remember who stood by him all his life. But days turned into weeks and the phone stayed silent. Then one rainy afternoon, there was a knock on my door. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Turner, holding her phone. "Margaret, dear, I think you should see this." She showed me a post on Facebook. It was Clara again, posing with luxury shopping bags, tagging expensive brands, writing, "Hard work pays off." Hard work? I almost laughed. No, my dear. Manipulation pays off for a while. But what she didn't know was that karma keeps receipts. That evening, I got a call from David, finally. His voice was nervous. "Mom, can I come over?" I said yes. When he arrived, he looked tired, like a man carrying invisible stones. He sat quietly, hands trembling slightly. "Mom," he began, "I need to tell you something." And what he told me would change everything. Apparently, Clara had maxed out his credit card, taken loans in his name, and even lied about being pregnant to keep him from leaving. When he confronted her, she screamed, broke things, and threatened to call the police, claiming he hit her. He looked at me then with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't see it before. I should have known. I should have listened to you." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My heart ached for him. He was my son, after all. But I also knew this was the price of his blindness. "David," I said gently, "we all make mistakes. But some mistakes need to teach us before they break us." He nodded. "She's gone now. She took my money, my peace, everything." I placed my hand over his. "Not everything. You still have the chance to rebuild yourself. But not with pity. With purpose. He looked up at me confused. What do you mean? I smiled faintly. You'll see. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with fire and fury. Sometimes it comes quietly, dressed as a lesson. And that night, as he slept on my couch, I knew this was just the beginning. Because the woman who thought she could humiliate me and destroy my son had no idea who she had underestimated. That night, as David slept on my couch, I stayed awake. The rain kept tapping against the window, like the world itself, whispering that something new was coming. For the first time in years, my heart wasn't filled with sadness. It was filled with clarity. You see, people like Clara think they can build a throne on manipulation. They charm, they lie, they control. But eventually they forget one thing. You can't outsmart life itself. The next morning I made breakfast. Nothing fancy. Just scrambled eggs, toast, and tea. When David woke up, he looked lost. His hands were shaking slightly as he stirred his cup. "Mom," he said quietly, "I feel like such a fool." I looked at him not with pity, but with love. The kind of love that doesn't comfort weakness, but reminds you of strength. "You made a mistake," I said softly. "But the real mistake would be staying broken." He nodded slowly. "She took almost everything, even my savings account. I don't know how I'll pay rent now." I smiled a little. "Maybe this is your sign to stop renting your peace to people who don't deserve it." He looked confused, but I could see the meaning slowly sinking in. Later that day, I sat by my desk and opened my old laptop. I hadn't used it much since I retired, but now it had a purpose again. I started writing emails, reports, and letters. You see, my job before retirement was with the City Council Finance Department. I knew how to read documents, contracts, and most importantly, how to trace money. And Clara had left a trail, one she didn't even know existed. David gave me access to his online banking. And as I scanned through the transactions, I noticed something strange. Regular transfers to an account under a company name. The company didn't exist in the official registry. I met her in a cafe. She looked different. Her perfect hair messy, her confidence cracked. I sat across from her, calm and silent. She began to cry. I didn't mean to hurt him. I wanted a better life. He was too slow, too small-minded. I wanted more. I leaned forward. "So you lied? Stole? Used the love of a good man?" She wiped her tears. "I can fix it. Just tell me what you want." I looked her in the eye. "I don't want your money, Clara. I want your distance. You'll transfer everything back to David. You'll sign this declaration, clearing his name from every loan, and then you'll disappear." Her jaw tightened. "And if I don't?" I smiled softly. "Then you'll learn how powerful a retired government worker can be." She stared at me, and for the first time she looked afraid. After a long pause, she signed the papers. As she stood to leave, she muttered, "You think you've won?" I looked up. "No, Clara. I just stopped losing." When I got home that evening, David was waiting anxiously. I handed him the signed documents. He read them in disbelief. "She really did it?" "Yes," I said. "She's gone." He sat down, his face buried in his hands. "Mom, how did you do it?" I smiled, pouring him tea. "By remembering that silence is powerful, but action is louder." He laughed weakly. "You really scared her." I looked at him seriously. "No, David, I educated her. Some lessons come late, but they come." He reached for my hand. "Thank you, Mom. I don't deserve you." Tears filled my eyes. "Just promise me one thing. Never let anyone make you forget who you are again." That night I slept peacefully. Not because I had taken revenge, but because I had reclaimed my respect. Still, life had one more twist waiting for us. Because a few weeks later, Clara's name appeared in the news again. And this time, the story wasn't over. It had been 3 quiet weeks since Clara signed those papers and disappeared from our lives. The air around my house finally felt lighter. The mornings no longer started with anxiety. And for the first time in years, David began smiling again. He found a new job in the neighboring town, a stable position. Not glamorous, but honest. Every day I'd pack him lunch, like I used to when he was little, and he'd laugh, saying, "Mom, you're treating me like I'm in school again." And I'd reply, "Well, maybe it's time you relearn what love without manipulation feels like." We were healing, slowly, quietly. But peace, I've learned, doesn't always mean the story is over. Sometimes it's the calm before the world starts to recognize what's been hidden. One morning, as I was reading my newspaper, I saw a small headline: "Local woman under investigation for financial misconduct." The name beneath it made me freeze. Clara Benson Lewis. For a moment, I just stared. My hands trembled slightly as I read the article. It said Clara had been reported for falsifying documents while working at a property agency. Apparently, she had used fake accounts to process client payments, money that never reached the actual company. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just folded the paper neatly and whispered to myself, life keeps its own balance. When David came home that evening, I didn't want to tell him immediately, but he saw the paper on the table. "Mom, is that her?" he asked quietly. I nodded. It seems her lies have finally caught up. He sank into a chair, his expression torn between shock and relief. "I can't believe this. She always thought she was untouchable." I touched his hand gently. "No one is untouchable, David. Some people just take longer to fall." He stayed silent for a while, then said, "I don't feel happy about it. Just sad, for both of us." I smiled softly. "That means you've learned, my son. Revenge isn't about joy. It's about justice finding its way home." In the following days, I started getting calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends from church, former colleagues, even my sister in another town. They had all seen the article, and every one of them said the same thing. "Margaret, it's unbelievable. She got what she deserved." But you know what surprised me? None of them knew the full story. They didn't know how many nights I cried myself to sleep, or how many mornings I looked at the phone waiting for my son's name to appear. They only saw the ending, not the wounds that led there. That's when I realized my story wasn't just about betrayal or revenge. It was about mothers who give too much, forgive too quickly, and stay silent too long. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I started writing publicly. I joined a local community group online, a place where older women shared advice and life experiences. I posted my first story under the name A Mother Who Learned Too Late. I didn't name anyone. I didn't use photos. I just told the truth from my heart. I wrote, "Sometimes we mistake our children's love for loyalty, but loyalty cannot grow in the shadow of someone else's manipulation. You must teach your children not only how to love, but how to see through those who pretend to love them." I didn't expect anyone to notice. But within days, that post had over 1,000 likes and hundreds of comments. Women from all over shared their stories. Of daughters-in-law who turned sons away. Of families torn apart by pride and deceit. It felt like I had opened a window in a dark room, and light started pouring in. One comment stayed with me. "You're brave, Margaret. You didn't just get revenge. You taught grace." That made me cry, because they were right. I didn't fight with fire. I fought with silence, with patience, and with truth. And somehow, that truth had reached people who needed it most. One evening, about 2 months later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, a young woman stood there, maybe in her 30s, holding a folder. "Mrs. Lewis?" she asked politely. "Yes. I'm from the Daily Herald. We read your online story. Would you be open to an interview? It's part of our Hidden Voices feature. Stories of women who fought back with dignity." At first, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted my life on display again. But then I thought, maybe this is how I close the circle. So I agreed. A week later, they published it. The headline read, "The Mother Who Chose Respect Over Revenge." They even used my quote at the end. "Forgive when you can, but never forget who showed you their true face." It became one of the most shared stories that month. Women wrote letters to me, thanking me for reminding them that they still mattered, even when the world forgot them. One of those letters came from someone unexpected, Clara's mother. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged. She wrote, "Mrs. Lewis, I know I have no right to write this, but I wanted to say thank you. You could have destroyed her completely, but you didn't. You gave her a chance to face herself. She's left the city now, trying to start over. I hope one day she learns what you already knew, that love without respect is hollow. I read that letter several times, not because I pitied Clara, but because deep down, I wanted her to change. That was always the difference between us. I didn't want revenge that destroyed. I wanted truth that transformed. Life became calm again. David eventually met someone new, a woman named Rachel, kind and grounded. They took things slow, careful and mature. When he brought her to meet me, I saw in her eyes what I hadn't seen in Clara's, warmth. Not ambition disguised as affection, but genuine care. As we sat for dinner that night, Rachel said softly, "Mrs. Lewis, David told me everything. You're the strongest woman I've ever heard about." I smiled. Strength is just pain that learned how to stand. David reached across the table and held my hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom." That simple sentence. It healed something no apology ever could. After they left that night, I sat by the window again. The same one where I'd cried months ago, but this time the rain wasn't cold. It felt like cleansing. I whispered to the night, "You took my tears but gave me wisdom. You took my son but brought him back. You took my silence but returned my voice." And for the first time, I truly believed. I hadn't just survived my story. I had rewritten it. But life had one last surprise for me, one that would test everything I had learned, because a letter arrived a few weeks later, from Clara herself. And what she wrote inside, no one could have expected. When I first stepped into their apartment, I felt something strange in the air, a kind of coldness that didn't come from the weather. The place looked nice enough, neat and modern, but there was no warmth. No laughter, no trace of real life, just silence. And that silence screamed louder than any argument could. Lisa greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My son barely looked at me. His face was tense, his shoulders stiff. It was as if someone had stolen his spark and replaced it with politeness. I had brought a chocolate cake, his favorite since childhood. I remembered how his eyes used to light up when he saw it, how he'd steal little pieces before dinner. Today, he only said, "Thanks, Mom," without even looking up. Lisa placed the cake on the table carefully, as though it was a duty, not a gesture of love. I tried to make conversation. Asked about work, about their new place. She spoke in short sentences, like she wanted to end the topic before it even began. My son didn't say much at all. I noticed the fridge was nearly empty. No groceries, no signs of home cooking. Just takeout boxes and half-empty wine bottles. "You don't have much here," I said softly. Lisa shrugged. "We're saving for something bigger. My husband's working hard. You know how it is. My husband." She said it like a declaration of ownership. "Not your son, not Daniel, just my husband." I smiled, pretending not to notice the stab in my heart. I talked about old times, how we used to go to the park on Sundays, how he helped me fix the garden when his father was sick. Lisa didn't care. She looked at her phone, nodding occasionally. My son just stared into his coffee. When I stood up to leave, I reached to hug him. He hugged me back, but it was empty. No warmth, no connection. I felt like I was hugging a memory. 2 days later, a message popped up on my phone. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from Lisa. "Hello, I hope you got home safely. We just have a small issue. The rent is due again. If you could help us, we'd really appreciate it. No, how are you? No, thank you for visiting. Just money." I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. I wanted to see if Daniel would text me himself. He didn't. 3 days later, another message. "The landlord is threatening eviction. Please, we really need help." Before, I would have transferred the money instantly, but something inside me had changed. Maybe I was finally tired of being treated like a wallet with gray hair. I replied, "I'm sorry, Lisa. I thought you two wanted to handle things on your own. I wish you the best." Then I put the phone down and walked away. Hours passed, and I could feel my heart racing. I had finally done it, drawn a line. But it didn't feel victorious. It felt like loss. That evening, Daniel called. "Mom, what's going on? Lisa said you won't help us anymore." "I thought you wanted to be independent," I said. "That's not the point. We're under a lot of pressure right now." "I know what pressure feels like," I said quietly. "I raised you alone after your father died. I never asked anyone for a single favor. He was silent. Mom, he finally said, Lisa just wants some space. She's afraid you'll judge her. Judge her? I only wanted to see my son get married. Is that judgment now? More silence. Then the line went dead. That night I didn't sleep. I walked around the house, remembering the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. The boy who said, I'll never leave you, Mom. Where was that boy now? Days turned into weeks. I heard nothing. No calls, no visits. Then one afternoon, I opened the mailbox and froze. A letter, no return address. Just my name, written in his handwriting. I tore it open. Mom, please don't be angry. Lisa overreacted, but she means well. I need to protect my family now. We just need some distance. I love you. Please understand. Distance. That one word cut deeper than any insult. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper until the letters blurred through my tears. My son, the same one who used to call me his hero, now needed distance. I wanted to call him, to scream, to cry, to beg him to remember who I was, but my hands wouldn't move. I realized then, sometimes silence isn't peace. It's punishment. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. A man's voice, unknown. Mrs. Bennett? This is Mr. Keller, the landlord of your son's apartment. I've been trying to reach him for days. Do you know if they're all right? My pulse quickened. Why? What happened? Well, the apartment's empty. They seem to have moved out overnight. Neighbors said they left in a hurry. My throat went dry. Moved out? To where? I'm not sure. But they've left some unpaid bills behind, and a few envelopes on the kitchen counter. One of them has your name on it. My knees almost gave out. I told him I'd come immediately. When I arrived, the door was slightly open. Inside, emptiness. No furniture, no clothes, no trace of life. Just dust, echoes, and that terrible smell of abandonment. I found the envelope on the windowsill. My name written again, but this time not in Daniel's handwriting. Lisa's. Inside was a single piece of paper. Just one sentence. Sometimes people have to disappear to become who they truly are. No signature. No explanation. I stood there holding the note, my hands trembling. I felt something inside me shatter. Not loudly, but completely. I sat down on the cold floor, surrounded by nothing but empty walls and memories. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not quietly, not politely, but fully. They were gone. My son, my only family, had vanished, leaving behind lies, debt, and silence. But as I sat there, in that hollow space, another feeling began to rise. Not grief, not pity. Determination. Because if they thought they could just disappear, if they believed they could bury the truth and walk away from me, they were wrong. I wasn't the weak old woman they remembered. I was a mother who had lost everything once before, and this time I wasn't going to lose quietly. I sat there for hours in that empty apartment, clutching the note Lisa had left behind. Sometimes people have to disappear. Those words kept echoing in my head like a bad song that won't stop playing. Disappear? From what? From me, from their debts, from their lies? I stood up slowly, my knees aching but my mind sharper than ever. I walked through every room, the kitchen, the bedroom, even the small balcony, hoping to find something they had forgotten. A clue, a receipt, a letter, anything. And then I saw it. Behind the wardrobe, half torn and dusty, there was a small photo. It was Daniel, my son, standing beside Lisa in front of a fancy house I didn't recognize. He was smiling, but it wasn't a real smile. It looked forced. Behind them was a nameplate. The Whitakers. Private property. I took the photo and slipped it into my purse. I didn't know who the Whitakers were, but something told me Lisa had more secrets than she ever let on. Back home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at the table. I hadn't used my laptop in weeks, but that night, I opened it and typed Whitaker Estate into the search bar. It didn't take long. A news article popped up from a few months earlier. Local businessman Michael Whitaker and his wife, Catherine, announced their daughter's engagement to Daniel Bennett. My hand froze on the mouse. Their daughter, Lisa Whitaker. So that's who she was. Not just my son's wife, but the daughter of a family with money, status, and power. The kind of people who cared more about reputation than love. But what was my son doing in this mess? I scrolled further. Another article. Whitaker family under investigation for financial misconduct. My pulse quickened. I clicked it open. Apparently, Michael, Whitaker's company had been accused of fraud. Millions of dollars gone missing. The investigation was ongoing, and Lisa, their daughter, was a key witness. Everything started connecting in my head. Lisa had married Daniel secretly. They'd cut me out. They'd disappeared suddenly. This wasn't about love or independence anymore. It was about running. I picked up my phone and dialed his number again. No answer. I tried again the next day. Nothing. His number was disconnected. For the next week, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Every sound at night made me think it was him calling me, telling me he was safe. But the silence never broke. Then one morning, while checking my mailbox, I found an official-looking envelope. It was from a law office in another city. My hands shook as I opened it. To Mrs. Margaret Bennett. We are contacting you in connection with your son, Daniel Bennett, who is currently listed as a person of interest in an ongoing financial investigation involving the Whitaker family. We request your presence for a short statement regarding your knowledge of his whereabouts. The letter slipped from my hands. My son, a person of interest. I sat down right there on the porch, my breath coming in short gasps. Could it really be true? My Daniel, the boy who cried when he broke a window because he didn't want to lie about it, involved in something criminal? No, I refused to believe it. That evening I packed a small bag, grabbed the photo I'd found, and took the first train to the city mentioned in the letter. It had been years since I'd traveled anywhere alone, but fear has a way of making you stronger. When I arrived at the law office, a young man greeted me politely. Mrs. Bennett, thank you for coming. He looked too young to be a lawyer, maybe in his 30s, with tired eyes and too much coffee in his system. We just need to ask a few questions, he said, guiding me into a small room. Is my son in trouble? I asked immediately. He hesitated. We're not sure yet. The Whitaker family's accounts were frozen 2 weeks ago. A large sum of money, might about $500,000, was transferred into a new account under your son's name shortly before that. My head spun. What? He nodded. We don't know if it was voluntary or if someone used his name. That's what we're trying to figure out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him my son would never do something like that. But deep down, a voice whispered, do you really know who he is anymore? After the meeting, I walked out into the rain, holding the umbrella but not really using it. The city lights blurred through my tears. Where was he? Why hadn't he called me? I took a cab to the address the lawyer had mentioned in passing, an old townhouse on the east side where Lisa's relatives supposedly lived. The windows were dark, the gate locked, but when I looked closer, I saw a familiar car parked outside, Daniel's old gray sedan. I walked around the back and found the kitchen window slightly open. The rain had softened the ground and my shoes were soaked. Still, I climbed in. Inside, it smelled like stale air and cigarette smoke. I moved slowly, my heart thumping in my chest. Then I heard it. Voices. Lisa's, sharp, angry. Daniel's, quieter, tired. I told you we can't stay here forever, she said. They're looking for us. We didn't steal anything, he argued. You said your father would fix it. My father's gone, Daniel. You think he cares now? We're on our own. I covered my mouth to stop a gasp. My knees were shaking, but I forced myself to stay still. Then I heard him say something that broke me completely. I never wanted this. I just wanted you. And now I've lost everyone else, even my mother. Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to rush in and hold him, to tell him I was there. But I stayed hidden. Lisa's voice turned colder. Your mother doesn't matter anymore. What matters is survival. If you contact her again, we're finished. Do you understand? Silence. Then, his broken voice. I understand. That was it. I'd heard enough. I stepped back quietly, climbed out the window, and walked away through the rain. Each step hurt like walking on glass, but inside, something had shifted. The truth was ugly, yes, but it was still truth. They had lied. They had run. They had used me. But now I finally knew the game, and if they thought I would disappear like before, they were wrong. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a witness. The rain had soaked through my coat, but I didn't notice it anymore. My heart felt heavier than the world itself. I had heard every word, the lies, the fear, the distance between the boy I raised and the man who now stood in the shadows of his own choices. When I got home that night, I sat in the dark. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. It sounded louder than usual, like time itself was mocking me. For hours I just stared at the photo of Daniel as a child. His gap-toothed smile, his small hands holding the puppy he'd begged me to keep. Back then he used to say, "I'll protect you forever, Mom." Now I was the one trying to protect him. The next morning I made a decision. I called the same lawyer who had sent me the letter. "This is Mrs. Bennett," I said. "I know where my son is." There was silence on the other end. Then he said softly, "Mrs. Bennett, you understand what that means?" "Yes," I whispered, "but I also know he's innocent, and I'm not going to let his wife destroy him." I gave them the address. My voice didn't shake once. When I hung up, I felt nothing, no guilt, no relief, just emptiness. By evening, the police were on their way. I didn't go with them. I couldn't. Instead, I sat by the window, staring at the same street where I used to wait for Daniel to come home from school. It was around 10 p.m. when the phone rang. It was him. "Mom," his voice cracked. "They took Lisa." My throat tightened. "Daniel!" She tried to run. "They arrested her. They think I helped her hide the money." "Did you?" I asked softly but firmly. "No, I swear I didn't know. She said it was just for a while, that she'd fix it. And I believed her. God, Mom, what have I done?" There it was in the voice of my son, the boy I raised. The guilt, the confusion, the desperation. "Where are you now?" I asked. "Near the old train station," he said. I didn't know who else to call. I grabbed my coat and keys without thinking. "Stay there. I'm coming." The city was silent that late at night. Every street light looked dim. Every shadow seemed to breathe. When I reached the station, I saw him sitting on a bench, drenched, his head in his hands. For a moment, I just stood there and watched. My son, my grown man, looked like a lost child again. "Daniel," I said softly. He looked up, and when he saw me, his face crumbled. He stood and stumbled toward me, falling into my arms like he used to when he was scared of thunder. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I held him tight. "It's over now, my love. You don't have to run anymore." He cried for a long time, silent, broken sobs against my shoulder. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red. "She ruined everything," he said. "She lied to everyone, even me. She said her father's company was clean. She used my name for the transfers, and when things got bad, she told me to disappear." "Then why did you stay?" I asked. He looked away. "Because I thought love meant loyalty, even when it hurts." I sighed. Love isn't supposed to hurt like this. We sat there quietly for a while, listening to the rain hit the tracks. For the first time in years, we didn't need to speak, but I knew what had to happen next. "Daniel," I said gently, "you have to tell them everything. Every detail. You can't hide anymore." He nodded slowly. "Will you come with me?" I smiled sadly. "Always." The next morning, we went to the police together. He told them everything. The fake accounts, the manipulation, how Lisa convinced him to move the money. The officers listened. They already had Lisa in custody, and his cooperation changed everything. After hours of questioning, one of the detectives turned to me. "Your son may not face charges. He was clearly being used." I felt my knees go weak with relief. We walked out into the daylight together. For the first time in months, I saw him smile, not the forced kind, but a small, genuine one. "Thank you, Mom," he said quietly, "for not giving up on me." I touched his face. A mother doesn't stop loving, even when her heart breaks. But even as I said it, I knew things wouldn't go back to the way they were. Some scars don't heal completely. They just fade enough for you to live with them. Weeks passed. Lisa's trial made the news. She pleaded guilty to fraud and money laundering. Her father's company collapsed. The Whitaker name that once sparkled with pride was now whispered with shame. Daniel started over, found a small apartment, got a job at a community center. He called me every day just to ask how I was doing. Each call healed a little piece of me. Then one afternoon he came to visit. He brought flowers, white lilies, my favorite. We sat on the porch drinking tea, the autumn sun warm on our faces. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe I should move closer, so I can help around here." I smiled, shaking my head. "No, Daniel. You need to live your life. Make your own peace. I've made mine." He looked at me, eyes soft. "You've forgiven me?" "I never had to," I said. "Because you're my son. And a mother's love, it doesn't vanish. It just waits." We sat there quietly, watching the leaves fall. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from surviving. Later that evening, after he left, I went into my room. I opened the drawer where I'd kept every letter, every photograph, every trace of the boy he once was, and I smiled. The past had hurt me, but it had also taught me something powerful, that love and pain are often two sides of the same coin, and the real strength is in choosing to love again, even after being broken. Before going to bed, I took out the last photo of him, the one from his wedding day, the one I wasn't invited to. I placed it back in the box. Then I whispered to the quiet room, "Maybe I wasn't there when you said I do, but I was there when you found yourself again." And that's the only wedding that ever mattered. The house was silent, but this time, the silence felt different, soft, peaceful. And for the first time in years, I slept without tears.